Well, let's stay with that story. South Africans from all walks of life are reacting to Africa's attempt to bring Russia and Ukraine to the negotiating table. Advocate Sipho Mantula is a researcher at the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs. And he joins me now to give us his take on the peace mission. Advocate, thank you so much for your time and good morning to you. What is your take? Because, I mean, from what Prof. Sandi Liswana had to say earlier on this morning, speaking to my colleague Gareth Edwards, he said, you know, Ramaphosa as well as other African leaders were nothing more than beggars coming to Ukraine and Russia in the hopes of providing a roadmap to peace. Do you think that was a success?
For me, is that when we do assessment of this peace mission, we have to look back at the nature of this conflict and this nature of this impasse between the two countries. And also, we cannot, at the first take of the mission, we also becoming pessimistic. For me, is that we have to be optimistic in the sense that this African peace mission is also part of the AU Agenda 2063 of silencing the guns, not only in Africa, but globally. And secondly, we had our own young people who were stranded in Ukraine. And at the same time, we are part of the UN system. So there's no way we cannot influence the UN security architect. There's a need for this peaceful dialogue, and there's a need also for the African heads of state to balance their priorities, because the same conflict affects our global index on food prices. It affects also relationships in terms of our role in the UN Security Council and also at the UN General Assembly. So for me, is that this first mission was just a first knock on the door. And I think that door was open from both countries. They were able to engage and they were able to relay also their own views on the conflict. Hence, African leaders had a 10-point plan that they were going to even present to both parties and engage in further. I would think that let's give it a benefit of doubt for now, but once we have a second round and a third round of the talks, then we can engage on its gains and its losses, and also on whether it was successful or not. We know that debacle of Poland Tumelo was the one that messed up everything, but at the same time, there was a meeting of minds between the two leaders and, between the African leaders and those two leaders.
Yeah. When it comes to, you know, perceptions on Africa, just post this peace mission and this trip out to Ukraine and Russia, how do you think this trip will influence, you know, other key role players watching this trip in terms of how they perceive Africa?
No, definitely. They will see Africa not only as a second developing state or as a developing continent, but they will see that Africa is also concerned about the plight of its citizens. Africa is also concerned about the UN Charter, which always reminds us that one of the policies or principal aim of the UN Charter is to save the succeeding generation from the scourges of war. So if Africa is not being branded positively by the media, then it makes Africans, as we have said earlier, as if we are beggars. I don't think we are beggars. We are not also monitors or observers. We are part of this peace mediation, and we will want to see the African continent taking a lead. More so, Africa has got its own domestic challenges, but it's also impacted by global conflicts.
Yeah. On the other hand, the former president, Jacob Zuma, was quoted, saying that the war is linked to BRICS, advocate that is linked to BRICS, and it seems they don't like the existence of BRICS. They, I'm assuming here, could be, you know, the West, NATO, some of those allies, and wanted to try and crush it. I'm also assuming here the former president is speaking because he has experience with being, you know, a president at the time when BRICS was obviously established. This almost sends a message that there was a greater, a picture here in terms of the war linking BRICS as well as South Africa. Do you think these peace missions will almost place a target on BRICS's back, on South Africa's back, from these other outside forces that the former president may be referring to?
No, definitely. But I think, Tumelo, another twist on this issue is that the NATO, the membership of NATO being applied by Ukraine was also the trigger of this conflict. And secondly, as you said, our membership and our role in the BRICS countries has also went down to the issue of ICC warrant of arrest, which for some of us, we see it as a spoiler also, a negative spoiler that you want to bring the fugitive into the peace talk. At the same time, you have a hanging warrant of arrest. And secondly, like you said, the BRICS agenda also, it's around the currency issues, it's around development, it's also around expansion of the BRICS countries, that it's a threat to the Western hegemony and the Western knowledge. And that's how, if one looks at that, former President Jacob Zuma might be correct, but if you have listened to even former President Thabo Mbeki, he goes further to raise the issue of non-aligned stance that these African leaders has to pursue, and also the listening skills that must be there. But as you have said earlier, there's an issue of sabotaging this expansion of the BRICS countries. There is also this theory and the thinking of undermining the role of South Africa, because we have played a critical role in many conflicts, whether you think of Rwanda genocide, DRC, Burundi, Sudan. We have been playing a critical role as African member states in dealing with these global conflicts, which also we were not the cause of these conflicts. We know that there are hidden hands in African conflicts. But if you look at the BRICS membership, I think that South Africa as a host and as a chairperson of BRICS is facing a mammoth task of trying to convince the Western powers about our role in global politics. And I think we are treading on the right path in terms of reasserting our independence, reasserting our diplomatic skills, of to say in global conflicts you need to have negotiations, you need to have diplomatic channels, which I also see, Tumelo, that we don't talk about the role of culture also, because where there are warring parties, there's always a cultural diversity that comes in, social cohesion comes in, but we cannot pursue peace missions politically, militarily. We need to bring the aspect of what I call the soft power of cultural diplomacy, because Russia and Ukraine, they share similar culture, they share similar language, but we have left this component of bringing the peace into the minds of the fighting countries.
We'll leave it there. Advocate Sipho Mantula, thank you so much for speaking to me about this morning. Researcher at the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs, thank you so much for your time.